Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I am so glad you are here. I'm going to start off this podcast because I feel like you need to hear truths, that you matter, you're important, you're loved, you're enough, just the way you are. I don't think we are told that at all or nearly enough in our lives. And truths need to trump shame in the inner critic, the shame voices that say you're defective, something's wrong with you, you're not good enough, you're a failure, you're failing, you have no purpose, you have no meaning. You may feel those things, but the truth is the purpose of you just being alive is enough. You being in this present moment is enough. And the fact that you have a growth mindset and you're here wanting to learn, evolve, delayer, grow to be you and be the best version of yourself speaks volumes about who you are. So thank you for being here. I cannot tell you enough how much it matters that you are taking the time for yourself to break generational cycles, to feel better about who you are. Today I'm wearing my shirt that a dear friend gave me, Practice Radical Empathy. And what if we all could embrace that a little bit more? So I'm very excited about today's episode as we're going to dive into the intricacies of personal development and pursuit of a fulfilling life. And we're tackling a topic that many of us struggle with, but we really don't talk about it all that much. It's denial and how denial blocks us from growth and keeps us stuck in the vicious cycle of our trauma, of feeling less depressed and less anxious, to having healthier and more connective relationships from being our authentic selves. And so I thought it would be an important topic to really explore on a deeper level. So I want you to pause for a moment and think about, what do you think about when you think about denial? So many people might come up with addictions, like we might have a family member, or you even might struggle with denying your relationship with alcohol, with substances, with smoking, with marijuana, with whatever that is, with social media, with gambling, with overspending, with living beyond your means, with food, with pornography. The list can go on and on and on, because I believe we all have addictive tendencies, and it's just a matter of what our addiction is. So my daughter would say her addiction is books. She loves books. Books are her thing. She's a senior in high school. She has always loved books since she was little. And the other day I said, honey, she went to Goodwill and she's like, it was $5. And I said, honey, the $5 adds up. I love that you love to read. And let's talk through what you're trying to kind of fill inside, because she has so many books. I mean, so many books. I can relate because I love books too. So we try to process through what's underneath the need for another book. That's just an example, like things you wouldn't think about that can be healthy, yet it's not in moderation. Like it's something underneath. Now, she's not buying books all the time, and she has enough books, but we don't feel like that. And she'll admit, that's my vice. I love books. I think she read 100 and some odd books last year, 130 books last year. Can't remember the exact number. And then this year she's read umpteen books. I think she's at like 60 books. She's an avid reader, which I love. So you don't want to stifle that. And we want to come up with what's underneath that drive. So denial can block us from really understanding what we're trying to fill. What are we trying to medicate? Are we trying to medicate the shame we feel? Are we trying to escape the reality of the stress we're under, or anxiety or depression, sadness or grief, or move away from something inside that we don't want to face, pain that we don't want to face? So it's so important in this first part of this episode that we understand denial as a defense mechanism. Denial is a defense mechanism towards your feelings. Feeling sad, which we know the 7 core emotions are sadness, fear, disgust, joy, anger, which also can be kind of a cover-up emotion. Rage can kind of fall into that cover-up emotion. Excitement, and then sexual excitement. That's based on neuroscience. And we can feel a combination of all of those at once. We can move from one to another, back to another, and it can be kind of a grief ball of emotions. So it's just not one emotion. But denial is a defense mechanism or a protection, if you will, a protector part that says, I'm going to protect you from pain. I'm going to protect you from feeling sad. I'm going to protect you from feeling scared or afraid. It doesn't really protect us. That's the truth that's coming forward. And it can manifest in so many different ways. It can manifest in a denial of an unhealthy relationship, that you're really not in a healthy relationship, so you ignore, rationalize, minimize, which we're going to get into, the person or make excuses for them. And it's super important that we are acknowledging what areas in your own life that you might be in denial about. And this is hard, so I want to hold compassionate, empathic space for you to rumble through what is that piece of your life that you really don't want to rumble through. Is it your relationship with alcohol? Is it an unhealthy relationship? Is it pornography use? Is it how much you're spending on social media? Is it a combination of those? Is it sugar addiction, caffeine addiction, relationship addiction, love addiction, like this perfectionism? So kind of start evaluating, take your journal out and just write the question down. What am I in denial about? What don't I want to see? And then I want you to write, what do you want me to see? What do you want me to acknowledge that I haven't acknowledged? So let's look at types of denial. Let's talk about these so we can deconstruct what you might be denying in your own life or in denial about. So number 1 is simple denial. I like the word simple. It's like just a simple denial. Refusing to acknowledge the reality of a situation. That's denial's definition. Refusal to acknowledge the reality of a situation. For example, ignoring obvious signs of a deteriorating relationship. Or I see this so much in family systems where a family member, let's say it's a child or a teen or someone in the family is struggling with a substance abuse issue and they start going, well, they're a teenager, it's normal, but they've had maybe a DUI arrest, maybe they've been hospitalized for it, maybe they've been kicked out of school, maybe they've had some consequences that were pretty severe. And what happens is I start looking at the family system, not to blame anyone. I need to see patterns that have been established in a family system, and then I'll start seeing there's one person in the family, typically one of the parents, that might struggle with their relationship with alcohol. And the other person who might be more what we call quote unquote a codependent will rationalize, oh, they've gotten better, or oh, they're doing better, or oh, they don't have that much anymore. And in denial about the impact that that person's relationship with that substance has had on the family system. The secrets that have been held, the hiding, the manipulative patterns. We kind of rationalize and minimize those, which we're going to get to. Number 2, another type of denial is minimization. It's admitting a problem, but downplaying its seriousness. It's not that big of a deal, or they're doing so much better, or it really hasn't had that much of an impact. And I try to shine compassionate, truly loving light on minimization, on a simple denial, by saying something like, well, let's tip our toe and see if there's any part of you that says this is a problem. Just what percentage of you believes this is a problem, and how might have it impacted other people? How has this impacted you? How has this impacted that person? How has this impacted your children? How has this impacted the family system? Have you talked about it as a family? This is a question that really looks minimization and rationalization in the face. Do you acknowledge that this is an issue and you ask each person how they're feeling about it? So let's say dad has an alcohol problem. Are we talking about it as a family? Are we saying, how are you feeling? Most of the time we're scared of the person with the problem because they're in such denial. But if you are in denial too, you're joining in that other person's denial as well. You're blocking the growth of yourself and the family system. And it's important that we see, what are we denying that is actually really happening? Like, it's really true that this is happening. Number 3, projection. attributing your own issues to others. I'm not angry. You're the one who's angry. So attributing your own issues onto others. We do this with our kids. We do this with our partners. We do this with our friends. We project and are convinced that they feel the way we feel. So I might feel sad about something and I'm convinced the other person, maybe my partner, feels sad about it. Or my husband when they're not sad. Or I look at their face and I'm like, you look really sad. And they're like, I'm not sad. I'm confused. And so then I'm like, you look really sad. And but I'm really sad. And I see this a lot in family systems where they're like, your father feels this. And it's really how the mother feels, but they're projecting it onto the father. They don't feel like they can say how they really feel. Number 4 is rationalization. So minimization is admitting the problem, but downplaying its seriousness. Rationalization is kind of a partner to minimization. Rationalization is giving an excuse or an explanation for why the person is functioning the way they do. They're just really stressed out at work right now, so they need a release. Or they just drink on the weekends. They don't drink during the week. This is a big one. They're not like falling down drunk all the time. They don't drink all day, every day. And that is a rationalization. It's a total rationalization because when they do drink, they can't just have one drink. I'm using drinking as kind of an example. There's many different things. There's workaholism. There is rationalizing why you're staying in a relationship with someone because you're afraid to be alone. You're afraid of never finding somebody. And so you rationalize their behavior because you're afraid underneath it. So rationalization is a defense. Denial is a defense because underneath it, you're afraid to confront your fear of being alone, your fear of being unlovable, your fear that it's you and you're too much, that you're the problem and nobody will want you. Instead of working through that shame and where that developed from and facing that shame and those feelings that come along with the shame, the sadness, the fear, the anger, the disgust, you're so afraid that you just stay in the relationship and rationalize why it's not that bad. And so if you find yourself minimizing, rationalizing, denying, moving away from projecting, which I've done episodes on all of those. I think there's one called Projection, and it's fairly early in the Close the Chapter podcast. If you know somebody that's in denial, we all are in some form or fashion. If we get feedback that's hard to hear, I'm going to be honest, a defense mechanism comes up and I might shift blame, which is number 5. It's another way, shift blame onto somebody else. Kind of blaming is another way of denying. I'm going to blame the other person and be in denial about really my role in it. So I might blame them. Well, I wouldn't have gotten so dysregulated if you weren't so upset with me or disappointed in me. And so I'm kind of blaming that person instead of saying, I did get dysregulated. And yes, the person might have had their own stuff going on, but I need to take a look in the mirror at my own reality, my own contribution, my own behavior. So it's really important that you're looking at the types of denial and which ones are your go-tos. And it might be a poo-poo platter of all of them. I want to hold all the space in the world for you to slowly and tenderly tip your toe in the waters of looking at your own denial. And then I want you to float back. So take a moment, take a very deep, big breath, and just scroll the scenes of your childhood, feeling your feet on the floor, or if you're driving, pump the steering wheel, take your deep breaths. I'd recommend if you need to pause this and do this when you have time and you're not driving or doing something else. And think about how denial was woven into your family system. Not to blame the family. We didn't know all this. Now we're kind of peeling these layers back. Who and what was the family in denial of? Was it mom's anger and her rage? Was it dad's hidden affairs? Was it mom's affairs? Was it money problems we were in denial about? Maybe your family overspent and didn't have enough money. Maybe it was someone's alcohol or drug use. Maybe it was someone's prescription medications that we're all in denial about. And so we never talked about it. It was the big elephant in the room that we never addressed. And maybe it was something along the lines of gambling or some financial woes that no one talked about, credit card debt of some sort. The list can go on and on and on what family systems were in denial about. Maybe it was pornography use. Maybe it was the fact that grandpa or grandma or aunts or uncles would come to family functions as completely intoxicated and nobody would say anything or saying inappropriate things. And maybe it was just lies and secrecy, but we didn't really know what was going on, but we knew something was off. So we have to trace back how did denial and maybe rationalizing, minimizing, blaming, how did that show up or projection in your own family system? And then look at it in your own life, your own relationships. What is the common thread? What is the pattern? Because the more you can float back and go, oh, this was such an embedded part of how we functioned, and I didn't even know it. This is such an embedded part of our family system. And then what I've taken and what I've learned is to continue that pattern. So we don't really talk about anything in the family. I don't talk to my partner about patterns. I don't talk to my partner about my feelings. I don't talk to my family about my feelings. And that's okay. We're just taking a look. We're taking a look around. We're not saying go do all these things. We're taking a look around so we can have some insight. So let's look at what blocks our growth and how denial blocks our growth. Because in relationships, it stifles connection and being your authentic self. It can prevent us from really taking a hard look at maybe some areas we need to improve on that can change generational dynamics. And it really stifles emotional connection and growth. So it can stunt our growth, in other words. And so you'll see maybe someone in your family system feels like they're 4 years old emotionally. Probably there's been something in that system that hasn't been acknowledged and brought to the light. And so if we have a trauma at 4, we might emotionally be stuck at 4. That's why it's so important to reprocess, understand what your body's telling you, tend to your body to regulate that, and look at how denial has played a role, consciously or unconsciously, in many parts of your life. So let's look at, we're kind of deconstructing, recognizing denial in your life. And self-awareness is the key, in my opinion, as you know, because I'm a big proponent of this, of the healing journey. And where have you might rationalize poor choices or maybe some behavior patterns? Where have you rationalized it in your own life? Where have you avoided discussions about specific topics because you don't want anyone to get close to your specific struggle? So you don't talk about sex because you don't want to bring up that you've got a significant pornography issue. Maybe you don't talk about alcohol because you don't even think you have a problem, but you can't just have one drink. Maybe you're feeling defensive when certain subjects are brought up. So take a moment, take a breath, and kind of think about what subjects do you get defensive about that you can just feel it in your body. I'm going to give you an example, and this is more of a daily kind of look at yourself example. So when I am tired or hungry or maybe hormonal, let's just be honest here, I can feel myself be more irritable, let's say, not as empathic maybe as I normally am, maybe a little shorter, and maybe my tone of voice changes. And in our family, we have made it a priority and a value to be able to speak with love and grace and say how you really truly feel. And it can be hard because my kids can tell me truths and I'm like, oh, I can feel it in my body. I'm like, I can feel shame come up. I can feel sadness. I can feel fear that somehow I've really caused significant damage. And we know that repair work is key in all of this. Repair, repair, repair. So I can feel myself getting defensive. And this happened yesterday. So we had an emergency dog visit. It's a long story. We were walking the dog. Another little dog came up. I've got a retired racing greyhound. He is the sweetest dog in the entire world, but he decided this little dog, and I don't know if there was something about this little dog. It was really hyper, like really, really hyper. So I had him in a stay and he just pulled me and I'm being drugged on the trail. It was a thing. So I was like, this is a first for everything. He bit his tongue. There's blood everywhere. So my daughters realized, didn't know this, did not like the sight of blood, haven't had this experience. So she's kind of having her own trauma response. I'm scraped up. I'm having my own fear that this other dog got hurt. Thank the Lord above. The other dog is totally fine. Did not get hurt at all. Meanwhile, our dog and me are pretty scraped up. So I was obviously not my normal self. I was trying to make sure and assess the situation. How's everybody feeling? I was not at my finest. I thought I was handling it fairly decently. And my daughter was like, Mom, why are you being so short with me? And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess I am. At that point, I went into kind of trauma brain. So I wasn't as self-aware as I normally am. And she said that and to kind of, it jolted me awake because I was in pain. I had hurt my hand pretty bad on the leash. I got my hand caught underneath it. Anyways, long story short, I was in pain and I wasn't functioning at my best. She had lots of grace for me and she was trying to give me feedback in that moment. I had to self-regulate, take my breaths. I wanted to deny that I was being short. I was like, I'm doing the best I can. I wanted to give an explanation and rationalize it, which on one hand, you can go, yes, understandable. On the other hand, she just needed me to say, I get that. Let me take a moment. Let me take some deep breaths. As she needed to process what she was feeling, I needed to self-regulate. And then I could process later on. And so that's an example of in real time and I denying how I'm showing up in that moment. Yes, we can hold compassion and grace for me that I was being drugged, I was hurt, I was assessing the situation. And I can also look at how I was short with her and how that impacted her because she was already traumatized. So my instinct, though, was to get defensive. My whole point in this was I in denial about my own tone of voice and my voice? Yes. And that's the key thing that has come up is my tone of voice. So sometimes I have to be more mindful of my tone of voice instead of denying that my voice is a certain way. My point being is I'm just taking a little example. And then how can you apply little examples to your life and maybe some bigger examples? Because when you can do that, you're going to break through and have so much more love pour in because you're not denying the reality of situations. Are you constantly blaming others for problems or dynamics? Yes, they have issues. And then are you taking a look at yours? Okay, how do we break through denial? First, you've got to acknowledge the reality / the problem. The hardest step is often recognizing that there is an issue, a drinking issue or an anger issue, or let's say I have an issue with being really reactive or intense. Am I being so intense that it's coming across as anger? Do I deny that that's a dynamic within me? Am I denying that's a pattern? Am I denying someone else's experience of that? Number 2 is to seek some feedback. This can be hard. Seek feedback. Talk to trusted friends or therapists who can offer a different perspective. Are you assessing your own patterns and the role denial has played throughout your life? Denying when people give you feedback, are you so defensive that you have a hard time self-assessing? It doesn't mean it's all true, but are you having a hard time assessing what is reality and what is truth? Reflect and journal. Writing down your thoughts can help you see patterns and confront realities you might be ignoring, suppressing, not wanting to see because you're afraid. Look at your own fear. So assess your fear that what are you afraid of if you accept that this is reality? Most people are afraid of losing someone, change, being alone, financial fears. There can be a lot of fears that you're going to be too much. People are going to think you're too much. People are going to think you're not lovable. What is the fear you have? And let's hold compassionate space for that fear to have a voice. And that's something you can process with a therapist that can be super helpful, or journal about your fears and where they're coming from so you can have some insight and understanding and notice where you feel that fear in your body. Where is the denial? And underneath the denial might be fear. Where is that living in your body? And let's connect the dots to do some EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing with a therapist, maybe some somatic experiencing, internal family systems. There's many things you can do with a therapist to clear that out and tend to that and offer that so much love and compassion as you reprocess it. Take some small steps. Start with small changes that can gradually lead to larger transformations. And ultimately, the last one is practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. Understand that denial is a common human experience, and it's okay to have growth opportunities. And maybe you've made some poor choices as a result of denial. Maybe you've had some consequences that were really painful. Give yourself some love because those are all to wake us up and help us grow. And so it's really important to stay mindful and present to your own body, emotions, your breath, your tone of voice, and your reality. What is actually happening in the present moment? Surround yourself with supportive people. Maybe you need a support system. Maybe you need people that are on this growth journey you're going to share this episode with and say, hey, can we talk about denial and what we both might be denying in our own lives? Maybe it's like you're drinking too many glasses of wine. Maybe it's you're scrolling on social media. Maybe it's your sugar intake. Maybe it's your caffeine. Maybe your love addiction. Maybe work addiction. Whatever that is for you, maybe you can have a friend who also is on a growth journey. I started this podcast because I want other people to be in community with other people that can speak this language, that can say, okay, I've totally rationalized and minimized this. I have not been honest with myself in fear that I couldn't do this. I wasn't going to be able to handle it. I didn't know what resources to gather some help. So therapists, 12-step groups, or any kind of support group is awesome. They have tons online. Let's say you're struggling with codependency, and that's kind of the addiction is caretaking other people. You can look up codependency support groups. You can look up all kinds of, type in, let's say you're working on parenting and not projecting. So you're looking at parenting support groups, parenting a loved one with an addiction. Maybe you're in a relationship with someone with an addiction. Maybe you need an Al-Anon meeting. Whatever that is, there are support systems out there. I promise you, there are lots. Or maybe someone's struggling in your life with an addiction and you don't want to be an enabler. You've been denying that you've been enabling this person. And so it's important you're getting help. If you can't help the other person, you get the help. So you're not enabling. Regularly kind of assess your life and your choices and what the reality of your life looks like. What patterns are you in? What is the tendency for you to do? Rationalize, project, minimize. And don't be afraid to seek professional help if that's what you really need. I think there's lots of resources out there that can help with denial. But the first number one thing is you got to admit that there's an issue. If you don't admit it, it's like an alcoholic that doesn't admit they have an issue, or someone with any kind of other issue. When we deny it and we're closed off, then chances are we're really not going to change it. And so I highly recommend taking a hard kind of inventory of maybe areas you've been suppressing or denying because of your fear. I want to cheer you on. I want to say there is so much freedom on the other side of personal growth from facing the reality of what's happening in the family system, what's happening within you. That's where healing can begin. If you deny it, there's no healing. Think about it. If you're staying in denial, you're not going to heal because you can't heal what you're denying. Because you won't let it come to the surface. You won't let it have a voice. You won't explore what's underneath it. You won't explore what it's trying to defend you against, what fear and pain it's trying to defend you against. And it's not working. It's just leading you to a dead-end road every single time. Nothing changes. That's like the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over and over and getting the same results. That's what denial does. That's a great definition of denial. It leads you down a dead-end road and you feel so stuck. You feel so powerless. And really the reality is you have power. You have the power to change it by facing it, welcoming it. And maybe you just need to take one little baby step at a time. And I'm here to say you matter. You're worth it. You are lovable. Don't listen to the lies. And I'm cheering you on your growth journey. And thank you for doing this work. Thank you for being here. And there's no greater gift you can give yourself and those that you love. So keep going. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, Kristen, Boyce, Boice.com. Thanks and have a great day.